you hear me? Loud and too clear, right? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and begin because it is time. And my name is Marky LeCompte, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Safe South Boulder. We're co-sponsoring the Solutions Forum with the Southeast Boulder Neighborhood Association, or SEBNA, hoping to identify concrete solutions to Boulder's most pressing and unsolved problems. Well, we're especially concerned about issues affecting South Boulder, like CU South. We know that the problems that we're facing in South Boulder are the same as those faced by every other one of our Boulder neighborhoods. I want to begin by thanking Steve Salim and Suzanne DeLucia of SEBNA and Harlan Savage, and they're all standing in the back there, of SOBO for helping put this forum together, and for Stephen Angus for providing the microphones and the video recording of this forum. There'll be a link on Wednesday to Stephen's recording posted at safesouthboulder.com, and on the signboard just outside this door is the link to the Safe South Boulder website where you can find that YouTube link. And I also want to welcome all the candidates here. Thank you so much for coming. And all the representatives and family, and to you, all of our audience. But before we begin, I'd like to explain that Ryan Schuhart will not be here. He is on the Transportation Advisory Board, and they have a meeting tonight. And unfortunately, his campaign manager, Hannah Davis, who was going to be there in his stead, apparently has a family emergency. So he sends his deepest apologies for not coming, and I'd like to urge you to go ahead and look at his website for possible answers to the questions that we're going to be asking the other candidates. And in addition, Taisha Adams is being represented by Michelle Dene, her campaign manager, and I haven't seen whether she is here or not. Yeah, okay. So she may or may not be here as well. And Taisha also had a commitment out of town. And again, they have their programs on their websites. And in addition, today is Indigenous Peoples Day. So I want to acknowledge that we stand on lands within the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and 48 other Native American nations who have been tied to this land since before histories were written. Their forced removal by local and federal policies were devastating and lasting, and alienated them from their homelands. While we can never rectify the devastation wrought on these peoples, we can commit to supporting Indigenous peoples, past and present, in caring for their land, valuing their oral traditions, and affirming their survival into the future. And now, thank you. I want to turn the mic over to our neutral and very skilled moderator, Bill Briggs, who will be explaining things and overseeing our proceedings.
Great, thank you, Marky. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to the candidates. I realize you have other things to do on Monday nights, like man the phones or listen to Monday Night Football, so thank you for being here. Let me start by saying that I am a neutral party in this event. I'm not affiliated with either of the organizing parties. I've made no endorsements in this election. I've made no contributions. I have no campaign signs in front of my house. Maybe that's why I've chosen this. I've been chosen for this job. I'm not sure. But I will vote. Quality and sustainability efforts. And you are held to 2 minutes, and the enforcer is sitting right here in the front row in your face, and she's got signs that you'll see, and she's got a big hook to pull you Pull the microphone away.
First, full disclosure, I have a migraine, so my eyes are half math. But if I would have taken medicine, then I slurred my speech. I thought that would have been worse. So here I am. If you want to check my website, it's really vague. So if I'm not saying enough today, you can go there and say, wow, that's the vaguest website I've ever seen. Okay, that's the truth. So there's a bunch of things I want to talk about with affordable housing. First of all, I want to talk about permanently affordable housing. Boulder has one of the best permanently affordable housing programs in the entire country, including cash in lieu and a lot of the way we do things. So we've made big dents in our affordable housing. Are we up to 8%? Yes. So, but we have this thing we're doing with affordable housing. Who knows what a voucher is? Okay, so just a few of you. So if you make less than a certain AMI, which is 60%, I think. I'm not that great with remembering fine numbers, but I will try. Then you can get a voucher from the federal government. What? 1 minute left? And the problem is a lot of people that are getting vouchers now have mental illness and drug addiction because Mental Health Partners is using that same voucher system to help people leave homelessness. But that problem is the working people who live in affordable housing, often there are problems with people, for instance, that are really having a complete breakdown and, in the middle of the night and such. So I would like to make our affordable housing divided into permanently affordable housing and permanently affordable housing with wraparound services for the mentally challenged and also for drug addiction. I don't want to combine those. And the second thing I want to say is we're having big problems with middle income housing. We keep trying, I know I've been on council 2 years, we keep trying to do something and nothing's worked so far, but with only 10 seconds left, I can't even tell you what I would do, but let's just say it has to do with a planning reserve, and I'm sure other people will bring it up, and that's it.
Hello, I'm Jenny Robbins. Like Tara said, you can visit my website at Jenny for Boulder for some of my background information. I will say that my background is in land use and zoning. Professionally, I've been in a profession for 20 years that's given me some opportunity to focus on land use and zoning, so that plays well into affordable housing. I think that Boulder right now is working hard to create affordable housing units. We have 1,400 units in the works right now through our affordable housing program. In doing that, moving forward with our exclusionary housing, our cash in lieu, and our corporate linkage fees in order to put cash into the program to leverage that for the state and federal dollars to create more affordable housing, I think is really important. I also think that the market here is very volatile. The market is in the business of profit, not in the business of affordability. So we're going to have to regulate for what we want. So I would be interested in looking at some rent stabilization opportunities. I think that we need to rezone our business districts, some of our industrial districts in order to get some gentle infill into our downtown corridors near mass transit. And I think that we need to take care of what we have. A lot of our affordable housing right now needs some help and some work. I don't think anybody's really done affordable housing well in the United States up to this point, so hopefully we can be a model if we continue to move forward with what we're doing right now. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Aaron Meyer. Let's go from the end to the beginning. So what are the benefits of doing affordable housing well? One of the major benefits is that we're going to have a lot more diversity in the community. If we're talking about ecological benefit, we need to recognize the social ecology, and that our social ecology is healthiest if we have a diverse populace. And so it's really necessary that we figure out affordable housing to ensure that we can have a diverse populace, to ensure that who is represented in Boulder is actually fairly representative of what's happening in the greater Colorado, US, and world. How we do that? I think there are a few good places. I think Jenny's kind of right, that nobody's done it well. I think we can look to places like San Francisco, Cambridge, New York, a lot of other places that have been trying to do inclusionary housing policies and learn from what they're doing well, and also learn from what they're not doing well. Terry, I have a lot of connections to San Francisco, and there's a lot of ways that San Francisco went wrong. So we need to factor that in. But I do think inclusionary housing is the way to go. We have good moves towards affordable housing in the city, but they're lacking right now. I think we really need to balance how well we're densifying, focusing on what are areas where we can increase density without hindering quality of life and ecological impact in the area. So it's really important to look at all that. I really would like to see us do a lot more in terms of being more creative. For example, if we factor in tiny houses, and tiny houses are not always tiny, but if we factor in other solutions such as that, then we can get a lot more creative with helping people to have quality housing while ensuring that we can have proper densification. So I'd like to see us do that, and let's measure it by how many people are we increasing getting into housing, and how are we increasing the diversity in Boulder.
Hi, my name is Tina Marquis, and thank you so much for having us here. This is a pleasure to meet all of you. I am also interested specifically in affordable housing opportunities for middle income with ownership options for those people. I want to see Boulder provide a continuum of housing options so that people who are single can then move into a housing type where they can have children, like I did, and then they can retire in maybe a third housing type or stay in the housing type they had. We have pursued some upzoning and development, but haven't insisted on the affordability piece. I think that we have not seen more affordability despite our attempts on a lot of development. I think we need to go back and require those affordability incentives, whether it's regulation or other incentives, financing. The other thing is I'm looking for ownership, and we'll be looking to Denver to see if Mike Johnson is successful with a rent-to-own program, so we can maybe shift people out of a renting relationship to an ownership relationship, getting them more housing security. The other piece is, my hope would be that we would have fewer in-commuters, because we could have the needs of our workers and the people that are looking to live in Boulder with us as our neighbors can be here, and we would have hopefully less traffic, although with 60,000 in-commuters, that's a lofty goal, and I recognize that. And that's it. I'll keep it short.
My name is Waylon Lewis. There's a lot of good ideas here. Giving us 2 minutes and then asking for specifics is a tough challenge, but welcome to running for City Council. Jenny had a fantastic point that I very rarely hear, which is protecting what affordable housing we do have. A lot of that actually goes off the market, gets redeveloped, becomes yuppie housing. I think we're already doing pretty well in yuppie housing. That's an unofficial classification. Most of us call luxury condos. And then, Tina has some creative ideas she didn't mention, so I won't steal those. But I think, managing the kind of Airbnb-ization of this town mindfully is important. The second homization and the spec homization, the Dan Carusoization, where you have a huge lot, you have an opportunity for some creative, beautiful holiday style. We always use holiday because it's the one most of us can agree on we like. There's some elderly housing, there's co-housing, there's affordable housing, there's single family homes that are generally pretty small. My friend Ryan just moved in there. And then going to someone was just mentioning, I think Tina, a fundamental part of affordable housing isn't housing at all. It's people already, half of our friends, right, have moved to Lafayette or Longmont or wherever. It's making sure we have regular, clean, convenient, hopefully EV buses and vans. I'm a big fan of smaller vehicles more frequently instead of huge empty buses. And making sure that we can get people in here so that we can maintain our employee base and our diversity and not just become a bubble in a bad way. We're a bubble in some beautiful ways. We don't want to become siloed from the rest of the region. Spec homes are something I hate. Jenny also mentioned Sam Weaver, our former mayor, is always talking about regulate for what you want. And we need to do that. And that's all I got. Now over to the Donald Trump mic.
I like the English prime mic. It's working? All right.
No. Barely.
It's not? It's not.
It will.
Let's try that.
Talk into it again.
I know.
Okay.
It is what it is. Okay, this one actually is working. I'm Jacques Takala, born and raised in Boulder. Unfortunately, a lot of my friends have moved out of Boulder and a lot of their families as well because they can no longer afford to live in Boulder. It's a huge issue that started this campaign for me and has been prevalent for everybody. Some things that Boulder has done well is reach a certain threshold of our goal for lower income affordable housing. What we need to do, like what people have said, is reach for that other half of it for middle income housing. Some things that we can do are pursue federal and state funds that are available, and thanks to one prop that was just passed, which is Prop 123, opens up some more funding for affordable housing for Boulder to use. Boulder County needs to continue to use, or Boulder needs to continue to have access to the affordable housing tax that is in Boulder County, and we need to properly use that for middle income housing. We need to increase linkage fees to hold businesses accountable to the demand that they've put on our housing market. I think that would be a great solution to have them be more participate more in our community. Along that note, we should also have CU do more to provide affordable housing for their students, because their students are about a quarter of Boulder's population, and that's one of the main reasons why our housing market has got so out of hand. We have to provide middle income housing for the families, for the teachers, for the firefighters, for the skilled professionals that live in Boulder, so that they have a place to live. An example that has worked is in Vail. They have a real estate transfer fee. It's 1% of the sales goes into their funding for affordable housing. I'd like to see Boulder replicate that and bring that money in for more affordable housing. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry Bernchich. Thanks for having us here tonight. As many have mentioned, Boulder's inclusionary housing program, which addresses low-income housing, is leading edge, and it's one of the best in the country. And while we can nibble around the edges a little bit to make it even better, that's, I think, not really where the big focus needs to be right now. As many have said, our middle-income housing, the housing for our in-commuting families, is really the sore spot. We have somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 people that are in-commuting every day and working here, and that has an environmental impact, and it also impacts the vibrancy of our community. So my feeling is, number one, is we need to, 10 years ago, the city conducted a housing survey of the in-commuters to understand their housing needs. I think we need to revisit that analysis in order to better understand what those individuals would need to live here, so that we can be building the right housing at the right price points. And then we need to really set metrics on reducing that in-commuting number and hold ourselves accountable to meeting it. So we're not just building housing for housing's sake. Another area I think is around the upzoning of our residential neighborhoods. I think on a limited basis, there's some value in doing that, as long as we regulate for affordability. So if we're looking at upzoning, a single family home to a triplex, we need to make sure that one of those units is permanently affordable. And then the last area that I think we have some opportunity in is rental affordability. When the majority council recently changed the occupancy limits, they missed a big opportunity to regulate for affordability. By increasing the occupancy limits but not requiring any affordability, we essentially just gave a big windfall to the owners and the landlords. I would like to see us revisit that and create a incentive-based zoning protocol, similar to the way we handle ADUs, where we would essentially allow variance increases in exchange for reduced rents. Thank you.
My name is Silas Atkins, everyone's hit on largely a part of the pieces that we have to do here. The one thing I would say, or two parts I would say, is one, I want to be careful about focusing too much on specific solutions overall. A lot of these are great ideas, and I think we should start implementing them, and we should also be keeping ourselves open to new ideas that come out as things change. I recently was made aware that HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, has actually put out new guidance on how we should consider building new development in our communities. And that goes back to Leland's example of the Holiday neighborhood, where there's a mixture of different types of housing altogether. It's been shown that this gives us the best return on our investment in terms of affordability, community engagement, and investment. So I think that's going to be very important. And two, we can't talk about affordable housing or anything else. Really, the 6 questions all are intertwined. Everything comes together. So Tina touched very nicely on we need to look at transportation as well. They also have to look at arts and culture. We need to look at gun safety. We need to look at solutions for those of us that are housing insecure. We need to look at wages. We need to look at basic income. So all of these pieces need to come together to make sure that affordable housing is successful. Because when we look at things in silos or by themselves, it's a good chance it's going to fail because it doesn't have the supports that it needs on either side to keep from tipping over. Thank you.
Good. No, you're good. No, it should be. Hang on. Muted it. Go ahead.
Thank you, candidates, for respecting the time limit. If nothing else, I can see you've gotten very good at speaking as well. Okay, second area is homelessness. It's probably not a surprise. And just this one time, I'll repeat the rubric that goes with that. What do you hope to do about it? Where have your proposed solutions been tried before? How will you measure your solutions' effectiveness in Boulder? And how will they positively affect Boulder's environmental quality and sustainability efforts? So Jenny, would you like to go?
Okay, so I'd like to start by saying that, I don't think that we can group the homeless all into one group. We have individuals experiencing homelessness, we have families, we have seniors. And in general, Boulder's done a very good job of working with the homeless population that wants to exit homelessness. We have 25 people exiting homelessness every month through the programs that Boulder currently has in place. The issue is that we have 25 more people coming in every month into Boulder. And so looking at that holistically, what I think we need to do is focus on the encampments that we have in the city down by the creek. And we need to work with the individuals that are in the encampments now to connect them with the services that Boulder has. Encampments are not a compassionate solution. People who live in encampments and are homeless and living on the streets, they have shorter life expectancies from 45 to 52 years old. They're disproportionately affected by violence. So we need to get people connected to the services that we have currently having offered. I will say that what I think is happening on the creek, so public safety is the job of the city and health is the job of the county. And what we have happening on the creek right now is really a health issue. It's a substance abuse issue and it's a mental health issue. So we need the county to step in to help us solve this problem. With that in mind, there's a county extension tax that will be on the ballot, and they're looking to appropriate those funds towards affordable housing. So my idea on this would be to appropriate those funds to Tier 1 housing or tiny home communities. And somebody who's done this really well is Madison, Wisconsin. They have something called Occupy Madison, and they have these what they call Occupy settlements, and there's people that work there full time, and they offer wraparound services, and it's provided by Occupy Madison. And that the people that have been there 6 months or longer. All of them have had substance abuse help and mental health abuse help, or mental health help. And that sort of community to put people in to recover is what I think would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Cool. I like Jenny's solution. That's a good one. I actually think Occupy Madison, sounds really great, and I want to know more about that. The one that I was bringing forward, what do I think could be done? I really think we should lean on a housing first solution. Where it's been done, Salt Lake City went from over 2,000 people in chronic homelessness to under 200. It was, I think, 91% reduction. So I think we should look at what Salt Lake City did well, and also look at now what Denver is doing. Because we have it so close to home, we can kind of like learn from how Denver is implementing it right now to see what works well and what doesn't work well. So I would lean towards a housing first thing that is working on getting people in there, creating supportive services, and having outreach to help connect people to those services. I like that the city just approved exploring the option of creating a pilot program of sanctioned camping for 25 people. I think we should really look and see how well that can work. I think that can help direct people along a housing first pathway to get people into housing. So I would be in favor of us trying out that sanctioned camping, seeing if it works. The metric should be, again, how many people are transitioning into long-term stable housing. I don't think we can just use decreasing homelessness numbers as a metric. I think that's an ineffective metric unless we're doing it relative to other places in the country, just for the simple matter that homelessness is increasing everywhere. And so we're gonna see more unhoused people wherever we are, even if our solutions work. So that's something we really need to take into account when we look at quality metrics, is recognizing the cultural context and taking that into account, because you don't really have a typical control study in this case. So I think, I'll leave it there.
Hi, I was just thinking about my first forum 6 or 8 weeks ago when I was just like, please, I don't want to be first. And now it's, please don't make me last, because everything has been said. Homelessness is such a big issue and it's contentious. And I think from my perspective, we need to do a few things and learn from both the city of Houston and also the state of Utah that Aaron was referring with Salt Lake City. In both of those cases, I think the defining feature was the regional leadership in terms of coming up with a clear plan, then engaging and getting buy-in with the different nonprofit agencies, the government agencies, and the other service providers in the communities. Now it's always tricky because Boulder is a city of 100,000 people, Houston has 2.9 million, and sometimes we have to be careful with the apples to apples comparisons. But what I think we need to focus on is regional collaboration so that we can use all the county resources, including the mental health resources that are managed by the county and the funds that are going to be collected by the housing tax extension. And just about measurement, we have a lot of good measurement on the dashboard that talks about who's coming into Boulder, where they come from, how long they're staying. But I would also like to add the different programs that we're building out, because sometimes we don't focus enough on the good work that is being done. And I think we need to recognize the work that people are doing. I also would like to talk about, in terms of environmental sustainability effort, we should see improved waterways, especially the lands adjacent to the creek, improved water cleanliness, less trash. We have a significant trash problem that is very expensive to maintain. And hopefully a community sentiment that we're helping our people who are struggling so much every day, and also creating a sense of safety in our town.
What Tina said, what Aaron said. I'm just going to repeat what Jenny said word for word. I mean, when you go to these forums, and we've been to all of them, it sounds like we're all in a lot of agreement, and on some level we are. And then you go out into Boulder and you remember how contentious this is. It's painfully contentious. I think I've lost 2 significant endorsements recently because of my support for safe zones. I grew up here, we haven't mentioned for once because we didn't do intros, in Boulder, in a Buddhist community. There's a phrase in Buddhism called idiot compassion, where you think you're being helpful, but really it's kind of about you, and you're actually making it worse. And I think that's a pretty good description of what we've been doing for the last 5-7 years, where homelessness has been the status quo, as Jenny said eloquently. Camping is not good for the homeless. I read a stat, and I double-checked it recently, 79% in one study of homeless women are sexually assaulted. There's fires, there's freezing nights, there's super hot days. It's not a good solution. We need to have enforcement, and actually enforce that enforcement, not just repeatedly enforce. It is incredibly expensive. We could apply that money to a chain link fence. All the nonprofits can go there, the police can go there. This has been shown to work in Houston to steal some of yours and elsewhere. And it's all about execution. I don't really believe in housing first. I also believe in services at the same time. But we can do this. Recently someone said casually to me, homelessness is so complicated, we can never solve it. That is not true. It has been solved, as Aaron mentioned. You're never gonna make it perfect. We won't, hug and sing Kumbaya. But you can make it much better, and this is a moral issue, and you can actually save taxpayer dollars and lower crime doing so. So that's what I'm going to work to do as an independent candidate, not independent in the RFK Jr. sense, but independent in the sense that I'm not here for the contention. Let's solve it.
So, what I've discovered through this campaign and previously through my experiences talking to those experiencing homelessness in Boulder is it really comes down to building a sense of relation. I was talking to one of the representatives at the Bridge House, which is an incredible program that Boulder should replicate and accelerate. That is something that has been incredibly successful. It has about an 87% success rate, so that's about a year-long program that gives housing, wraparound, mental health assistance, rehabilitation assistance, ready-to-work programs, and actually does not have a one-and-done policy with relapse. They're very lenient with that, and they help those experiencing mental health issues understand why they're going through that. So that's really what Boulder needs, is we need to develop relationships with those experiencing homelessness and let them know that we have the tools to help them. One of the greatest tools that we have is currently being purchased in Louisville. It's a mental health facility that the mental health partners are buying with ARPA money. That is going to allow for rehabilitation and mental health work to be done to essentially start that first step to help people understand where they're coming from, the trauma that's causing these issues and the trauma that's preventing them from getting back on their feet. So that's really what we need, is the appreciation and community aspect and compassion for those experiencing homelessness. And then we need a 24-hour shelter that gives them a sense of stability and security. And this 24-hour shelter should have ready-to-work programs as well as programs that help them get a bank account, help them get government assistance. It's really just about building the resources that have a sense of stability and the proper fundamentals to help people get back on their feet. Thank you.
So all major cities are dealing with this problem right now, and I would say none of them are doing it very well. So rather than looking at what's working, I would say let's just make sure we're not following what's not working. We need to really recognize that when we talk about homelessness in the context of Boulder, we're really talking about the 150 or so unsheltered individuals that are living in our streets. And we need to get honest about the problem. It's estimated that 75% of this population is dealing with substance abuse and mental illness disorders. So the idea that housing alone or temporary sheltering is going to solve the problem is just unrealistic. We need to, without the long-term treatment options and alternative sentencing that's going to push these folks into the treatment that they need, we are never going to break this cycle. We desperately need some long-term treatment, most importantly, sober-supported transitional housing, where folks can go after detox or after jail release to continue working on their sobriety. It's absolutely essential. We also need to take a look at our permanent supportive housing model. Right now, we send individuals who are in the throes of meth and fentanyl addiction into housing with basically 1 to 2 hours of voluntary support. It's just not enough. We need to get way more data-driven about what's happening there. We're having meth contamination in those facilities, overdoses. We need the city to be much more data-driven so we can optimize and then correct what's not working.
Yeah, there are lots of great ideas coming from everyone, and we are doing some great things in Boulder, absolutely. We need to look at expanding those. We need to look at implementing new things that are out there, looking for new solutions if things aren't working. Most importantly, I have a question for everyone. Is there anyone sitting in this room right now who is currently experiencing being unhoused? Is anyone experiencing being unhoused right now? Does everyone have a place to go at home? Okay. So one of the biggest things that we're finding with things that are happening around the country and around the world for that matter is that we know best what we need. Here in the United States, I think the last figure I saw is about 2/3 of the country would not be able to find $400 for an emergency. And medical, car, home, whatever it is. And so some of the things that are working are things like basic income. Denver just released the results of their study. Several individuals, and ultimately we're talking about our neighbors, even if we have folks that are coming from other places. We're talking about us, ultimately, all together here. This is a community effort. And so it's very important that we look at that, and the studies are finding that we know what we need best. So that touches on what Waylon was saying, that it's important that we engage all of us in this process, not just assume that we know what's best. And so with the Denver Basin, the biggest takeaway was that there were individuals who were given $1,000 a month. Everyone is still housed. There has not been anyone who is no longer housed. And so it's very important that we are looking at this in that perspective of supporting ourselves, our neighbors, and everyone in our community. Thank you.
And Tara.
Okay, everybody look at me because I'm going to sit down. Okay. So Silas is correct. If we can get people to not fall into homelessness, that would be good. So EFA has a program. It's called First Housing, or is that right? First Housing, First Building, something with the word first in it. And if you have money at the end of the year to give to that, do it. Because if we could stop people from losing their homes, I don't want to talk about the many reasons, you all know what they are. I think that's the first step. I do support the camping ban, but I will tell you that in the 2 years that I've been on council, I've mostly focused on homelessness. And the camping ban, I believe we need, because we need to keep our public spaces. But I really moved on after that to say, well, what do we do actually to solve it? And so I started visiting various places. That's what I do in my free time. No, I don't have any free time. But I went to Denver and I visited this place called the Other Side Academy. It's very similar to, what was that? Bridge House. This is what happens. Let's say that you commit a felony and you go to jail. Then the judge says to you, would you rather, let's say, spend the next 5 years in jail, or would you rather go to the Other Side Academy? If you do that, you have to spend 2 years there. They will help you to get off drugs, because it's about substance. It's for people that commit crimes, but also have a big substance abuse issue. And if they say yes, then you go to the Other Side Academy for 2 years. They help you to get off drugs. They give you a skill. I saw them giving this, teaching people Salesforce. I don't know if you know what that is. So real skills. There's a moving company involved in that. And then they change your community, because the big issue is your community, we all have our communities, and so do the people that are unhoused. So this is a new community of people. They make new friends that all try to keep sober. And that is one of the most exciting things. And we did have our first clients at the Boulder County Jail recently, so that's some good news, which I thought I'd bring you. So I hope you appreciate it.
Thank you all again. Aaron, you're up next. The next area of questioning is public health and safety. Should I read the rubric again? You're all up. I think it doesn't help at this point. Aaron, go for it.
So Eugene, Oregon, that's actually where I was born. Eugene, Oregon implemented a program called Cahoots that has successfully redirected about 6 to 8% of calls to the police to mental health outreach people. So this is people who are trained in going and addressing what is actually a solution that does not require force, but a solution that requires presence. Like most of what we're seeing in our community is like public safety issues. We come with so much force that's like gonna like arrest this person, whatever, but oftentimes if somebody could be present with somebody and listen, then the person who's experiencing what's oftentimes a mental health break, oftentimes related to substance, if someone can be present with them, then we might be able to find solutions and we might be able to get to the root of it. So I think that's what I'd like to see more of in Boulder, is us, and we're doing some of this, but I think we could be doing a lot more, is like, let's make sure we really have mental health trained responders who can go out and meet these people in the community who are causing a disturbance, meet them with presence, and be able to have a conversation and help to understand what it is they actually need, because that's not only meeting the people who are suffering and helping to address that suffering, it's also giving us really important data about what's happening out there so that we can bring that data back, like Terry's talking, we need more data. We can bring that data back to our teams to build better solutions. So I'd like to see that, and also something I would like to see us do is don't just hire a bunch of mental health facilitators, do that, but let's create public education programs so that we can train people in our community and how to meet those situations with presence so that we can meet people in our community and actually help them get the help that they need. So create a team of mental health facilitators, create an education program so that we can train our community to get out there and meet people, and measure that by seeing what is changing in the rate of calls based on disturbances. And I have a feeling that this would be successful to help there be a lot more disturbances because we have many more people who could meet those disturbances effectively.
Okay, so on public health and safety, I'll take safety first. The City Council just unanimously voted to adopt the Reimagined Policing Plan that includes a lot of preventative elements and compassionate ways to address the public safety issues that we're facing, particularly in the downtown area. And those includes the CRT team that provides some mental health connections and helps connect people with services. And I'm really optimistic about that plan, and if I'm elected to City Council, I'll be looking to fully fund the Reimagining Policing Plan, as well as to measure its success and continue to hear feedback from the police chief on what they need to be supported. And it is really a very progressive way of policing. On public health, I want us to maintain and improve our wastewater treatment systems and update our pipes. We learned that they could use a little extra funding. And we, of course, have an air quality crisis. And so I would like to put into our legislative platform or continue to advocate for regulating and limiting the sources of our air contamination, which include fracking, in a statewide level. So that from a public health perspective, I think that's important. It also has additional costs in terms of the cost for people who suffer from asthma. And then the water is really important because some people are having water shipped to their homes or choosing to get water that's put in bottles. And it seems like a small thing, but it really adds up. We all know how terrible single-use plastic is, Waylon. And we do need to, if we have clean water that we trust, hopefully we'll be using more things like this and not opting for other water sources. So that's it, thanks. Oh, finally, e-bikes. We need to do something to make sure the e-bike situation calms down. Whether it's like a voice and sight training program for 12-year-olds, I don't know what it is, but we've got it's coming up a lot.
Well, yeah, there's a lot here. I'll start with fire mitigation, flood mitigation, just those little issues. With climate crisis, we're heading into a very extreme few decades, 50 years ahead. Anyone of our children or grandchildren, it's going to be pretty rough. So, we met with our fire chief, Mike Calderazzo, and he said, he stays up at night thinking about the fire danger. I remember once from my bedroom window seeing Flagstaff, someone flipped a cigarette or something. It was never proved, we don't know. And the fire, you could literally see it go, like just expand. It was stunning to see how quick it moved. Luckily, fire department was able to get up there. I think 8,000 people called 911, and they could handle it. But we need fire mitigation crews going door to door all over Boulder, armed with information about subsidies, to replace your 8-foot high dry wooden kindling fence. We have the same issue with flood mitigation. I'll move forward since we're already running out of time. I was involved with mudslingers and other efforts around the 2013 flood. I had a little bit of help, lifted a car out of the mud and sand. We were discussing it earlier. This will happen again and again. I think some of you are very concerned about flood mitigation, and we need to be ready for it, and we are not. Same with fire mitigation. There's a lot more here. We're going to have future pandemics. We did nothing to change our ways as a globe or as a society after the last one, or very little, other than to argue on social media about it, which apparently is not a preventative measure. For that, we're going to have a council that can work together and actually get towards some solutions. Solutions should be how you vote. Find candidates who care about solutions, not invective. Thank you.
So what we're going for is a higher quality of life. Higher quality of life in Boulder for businesses and for residents alike. I think that's something that's very important to keep in the front of our minds when looking at public safety and health. I'll start with what's working, and that's the reimagined police plan that was stated earlier. Incredible. If elected to council, I would fully support that as well in Chief Harold's vision. I think that's done a lot with compassionate and preventative approaches that have helped out some businesses and allowed us to target certain areas of the city that have higher crime rates or crime reports. Great first step. Next thing that's kind of attainable, but clearly hasn't been too successful is the Vision Zero. So currently it's not on track right now, and we need to make sure that is on track, because Vision Zero allows for us to have safe pathways, bikeways, cleaner air, and just make sure that everybody's able to get around in a safe way. With Vision Zero, some numbers here, we've had about 500 crashes in Boulder this year, with 10% of them involving bikes or pedestrians. So that's something that needs to really be honed in on, so that way everybody's safe getting around Boulder. Last on my, and then also we need more pathway maintenance in the wintertime. We have to make sure we're clearing ice and snow so that everybody can get around and be safe. And the last thing that's a little bit even less obtainable is air quality. That's a really tough one to combat right now, because what was stated earlier is fracking is a huge issue on that, and unfortunately on City Council we can't necessarily ban fracking. But what we can do is we can work with businesses to reduce the 60 commuters of 80% single occupancy vehicles. That is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, and we have to continue to increase alternative multimodal transportation. We have to continue to switch our grid from fossil fuel heating to electric heating, have more solar, have more renewable energy. I mean, who misses the blue skies that we had during COVID when no one was burning fossil fuels? I know I do.
So we can't continue to ignore the humanitarian crisis that's happening in our streets right now. Allowing overdoses and assaults and open-air drug use to occur with no meaningful response is not compassion, it's complacency. So while the city is working on the long-term homelessness solutions that we all just talked about, we have to agree that sleeping in our streets is not the answer. We have available space in our shelter, we've got available space in our detox. We need to create a process and an infrastructure that ensures everybody has somewhere safe to go. On top of that, we really need to work with our court systems to enforce meaningful consequences for repeat criminal behavior. We have a community court right now that is in the habit of tearing up tickets rather than enforcing repeat offenses. And you have individuals going into court with 10, 20, 30, 50 offenses, and there's never any accountability. Some of this were handcuffed because the state has passed some defelonization laws and bail laws that we can't get around, but we do have latitude, and we do need to work with our court system to understand and really look at the criminal activity that's happening and make sure that in the cases where we've got violence and the proclivities for repeat violent behavior, that they are enforcing meaningful policies around that. Thank you.
Everybody hear me? All right, there we go. So something I don't think I touched on earlier is one of the key pieces of all of these solutions that we're talking about is we've got to be looking at a regional and statewide solution matrix where we are involving everyone. It's very important to get to specifically public health and safety. Public health and safety is about everyone feeling safe, and that goes back to getting our basic needs met. We can do some of that with the basic income that I talked about earlier, the rent assistance that we're working on with EFA and funding for that. There's many, many solutions that I could talk about here, and there's not enough time to talk about them in 2 minutes. But we have to look at all that through that lens. And then I think what a lot of folks think of when they think of safety and public safety is their own personal public safety. And so in order for us to get to feel safe, unfortunately we can't do that through policing. We do have to make sure that we are ensuring that safety in the public sphere and taking care of the more severe things. But in terms of those of us that are unhoused right now, it's not going to help. And we've got a lot of great wildfire and flood mitigation plans the city has in place. What we're lacking is funding. So we're making some choices as a community and as a greater country as well, state, country, etc., to not fund the things that we need to. And so it's very important that we consider that, what seems like a good short-term savings to us will benefit us better. We just got a stat actually from a meeting that a bunch of us attended, that for every $1 in prevention for fire mitigation, flood mitigation, etc., you get $9 back. So that's, I think, a pretty good investment. And so I'd like to see us look at more of that, look at big long-term solutions and make sure that we're funding those properly. Thank you.
I'm standing up for just a second. Isn't this a nice jacket? And now I'm sitting down. Okay. So like I said, I visit a lot of places. I'm going to focus on mental health right now. A group of us, as a city council person, I went with Judy Amavli and Rachel Friend up to the Larimer County campus where they had a tax that passed to help those experiencing mental illness and drug addiction. And they're building this really giant facility. Now, doesn't this sound great? I'm going to read you what this facility does. You'll be so excited. 24/7 urgent acute care, crisis services, residential treatment, intensive outpatient care, psychiatric evaluations, crisis stabilization, substance misuse treatment, and detox, supported by step-down sober living and supported housing options. So you can bet that I was really excited when I learned at City Council 1 or 2 weeks ago that MHP, Mental Health Partners, is breaking ground in Louisville on this new facility. And I said in the meeting, my dreams have come true. I really did say that. But then I found that they didn't come true, so I was bummed out. And the reason why they didn't is because actually MHP is moving their facilities that are currently here over there. So I'm kind of down about that. But the good thing is that they have 45,000 square feet. So they can get more and more treatment and more services and inpatient and long-term residential services, but they don't have funding for that. So they're going to be looking for grants. We don't have a mental health tax because the county commissioners decided that they wanted to use it for housing. What I'm hoping is the housing that they're going to use it for at least is supportive housing with wraparound services for those that need it, because once you get into housing, it's really easy to be evicted if you're having a mental health breakdown or a drug problem, and keeping people in housing. Housing retention is one of the most important things for them, for anybody actually.
Okay, I'll stand up. For this, Tara, stand. Okay, so in addition to getting people off the streets and into county-provided services, and in my opinion, under roofs and not tents, I think that we need to support our police and the new reimagined policing plan. Their proactive community-based approach is revolutionary, and I'm really excited that we have that here in the city. I think we also need municipal court reform. We need some clarification as to how people are going through our community courts and our municipal courts here. So recently I went on a ride along with the police, and I was able to see how the CERT team and the downtown ambassadors and the HOT team all work together, and it's an amazing structure that they have right now through our police department. But I also saw a lot of things that were not so great in the way that we saw people who were using drugs in the park, and the bikes and things that the single police, because of the way the state has managed the legislature, their hands were tied. So locally, I think that we can do some things from a policy perspective to potentially work through people doing drugs in public. And so that's something that I'd like to work with our city courts on. Also, I think that safety on our streets will create the opportunity for people to use more of our public transportation systems, walk more than drive their cars, use bikes more than drive their cars. I mean, even leaving the city council meetings on Thursday nights, there's a police officer that's there all the time, and then people are always usually escorted to their cars either by somebody that works there or not, or the police officer, as that could be a dangerous area in the evening. So that is something that I would want to focus on, is trying to remove people and put them into under roofs. Also, our emergency response from a health perspective and a safety perspective, I think is really important. And we learned that our emergency department, our emergency response department, has just created an opportunity for new alerts to be pushed out to people in the case of a wildfire or evacuation. So we will have new routes out and new ways for emergency alerts to come through. I think that's really exciting as well.
Great, thank you. How are you doing? We're halfway through. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. Okay, fourth area is maintaining Boulder's development within its existing space and resources. So Tina, you're up on that.
Yeah, this was a really good question, especially given the legislative session last spring. And I do support, open space and the blue line, and don't want to go over the height limits, and also understand that we need to create more opportunities for different types of people to live here, and it is a thorny topic. So, and the HB 123 gave us a lot of ideas, but I don't think there was enough stakeholding with the different communities around the land use suggestions that were made. And I'm hoping, sorry, am I doing the right question? Yeah, okay. So there were a lot of ideas about increasing density near transportation centers, which I think can make sense. There were some upzoning ideas that I didn't concur with because I wasn't sure whether they're close enough to transportation. They might actually generate more VMT, vehicle miles traveled, than if they were actually far out. I also think we need to be really careful with water, and water was addressed in the land use bill, but I think it needs to take a front seat position in terms of making sure your development is in line with your water resources, especially projecting out into the future. And those are the main things I'm looking at, is just making sure that we have what we need to support the population that we have here. The other thing is that I'm sure you're all aware that growth gaps were eliminated this session as well. So that's something that we've talked about in Boulder, but those are now, those have been removed at a state level. So that's something we should all just be contemplating.
Development account?
Boulder development within existing space and resources.
Right. So, historically, Boulder, this is something I think a lot of us have been proud about. I grew up here. Our mindful development, you mentioned the kind of various constraints. Constraints is a negative word for a positive thing. Help create an amazing town. Now we're running into the fact that a new generation of kids and families, etc., can't afford to live here. So we're kind of, for the first time, I think, feeling some of the negative sides of that. And I think someone mentioned, Jacques, my fellow Boulder boy, that CU has not been enough of a partner here. So I'm on the Hill, and we'll just be polite and say the students' effect on the Hill is rather dramatic. So yeah, I think density is one of those words we love to fight about. In past campaigns, it was the D word. I think there can be eco-built, human-centered density, if we want to use that word. That can be delightful. That's a nicer D word. And help create, again, like Holiday or various neighborhoods that feel like neighborhoods. I remember I was up there, a tire fell off my dog bike cart, and within 5 minutes there were 5 people out there, including one with a tool chest. That's the kind of neighborhood we want. And if you know about blue zones, neighborhoods are joy and are de-stressing and are resilient in times of climate crisis, etc. COVID. So I think we can build mindfully. We need to definitely target middle income. I mean, I feel like we've already talked about this. There are people in future generations, maybe not this council, who will be coming for our open space, and I think we need to be ready for that. And we need to infill, whether it's ADUs or
requiring affordability along with the occupancy. I agreed with Bob Yates, his comment on that the next day in the Boulder Reporting Lab. We need to do this intelligently and thoughtfully on traffic corridors, as I think Tina mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a really good question, or topic, I guess. What we have in our existing infrastructure is what some environmentalists call embodied carbon. So that's the efforts that have been put into building these developments, all the emissions that have gone into building these developments, and essentially we don't want to waste that. We want proper infill and redevelopment of these buildings, so that way we're being the most sustainable as possible. That's my goal. If I'm elected to City Council, I'm going to make sure that Boulder is the most sustainable city in the world. Mark my words. But what we need is something that Tina has talked on, is our water infrastructure is falling apart right now. And there is a lot of work to be done, and we really have to prioritize the oldest parts of the city first, and then work our way out from that. So unfortunately, my neighborhood in Table Mesa will probably be last. But I'm okay with that because we're focusing on the most important parts of the city. And while we're focusing on the water pipelines, at the same time we need to be looking at our natural gas pipelines and replacing those with electricity. So it needs to be a lumped program together to be the most efficient possible and be the most sustainable possible. Stepping aside from the underground is the above ground neighborhoods, the most important part of our city, the communities that matter most. As Waylon said, they are essentially the heart and soul of our city. And they give us a background to kind of have support, so we have to make sure that if we go into develop or infill or redevelop parts of the city that have neighborhoods, that we're working with the community. I believe it's Madison, Wisconsin, which has already been mentioned earlier today, but for another reason, Madison has neighborhood associations with city staff that's actually represented in those neighborhoods. So we have neighborhood associations right now, but there's no city relation. So that's a huge thing that I would push for if elected to council, to make sure that each voice is heard and that each neighborhood has its own representation, because each neighborhood in Boulder has its own flavor, has its own character. They're not all the same, so it's critically important that we make sure those voices are heard. Thank you.
So the Boulder Valley Comp Plan was really a master in urban design, and we really have our forefathers and mothers to thank for what we are experiencing here today in Boulder. But the lack of affordability here is creating just a seismic shift in the nature of this community and the inability of families to stay here, declining school enrollments. And we do well, as we talked about earlier, on our inclusionary housing and low income affordability, but where we're falling down is middle income. And the reality is that with the exorbitant land costs we have, the only way we can make any real meaningful dent in that is building on land that the city owns. And at this point in time, we have very little options left. And what's going to come up in front of this next council is two very important land use decisions, one around the Area 3 Planning Reserve and one around the airport. Both of these represent realistically some of the last large-scale possible building developments that we have in Boulder. So I think this council will be evaluating that. I think both options need to be on the table in a way to make some meaningful impact on our middle housing goals. The other area that I think is really important is what Jacques alluded to, which is our water infrastructure. The Boulder Creek in parts is designated as an impaired waterway due to E. coli contamination. And the understanding is that the aging infrastructure, particularly around CU, is such that it just can't accommodate the loads anymore. So, the city's been a little bit opaque, I would say, in monitoring and presenting sort of the data around, what are the measurements and what's the cause of that. I'd like to see a lot more attention put on that, because I think it's an equity issue for families that rely on that creek as a recreational spot in the summer. Thanks.
So I'll build a little bit on, Tina mentioned putting things near transportation, other services. Jacques was mentioning the sustainability, Terry mentioned the water. All those things are very important. We have to make sure that we include those. Infill is the word of the day, and we have many places where we can build that already exists by shifting how we do that. Council just recently took a step towards that by allowing us to have duplexes and triplexes in more places. which allows us to put more on a single plot of land in the existing boundaries of Boulder. The other thing to consider is the neighborhood factor that everybody was mentioning, and so one of the things I heard recently was a former city staff member, and I'm drawing a blank on their name right now, did an interview where they talked about the neighborhoods and how we could look at that. One of the things to know is the history of North Boulder, where there was supposed to be a grocery store up there, right up where all of the new paving was done and the pathway is and everything else like that. And that never happened. I think it was Safeway backed out and built it, down the street where you have to drive down to get your groceries. So in addition to housing, also looking at what services we need so people can stay closer to home, so that we can maximize the value in where they're living and ensure that we're reducing our emissions and protecting our environment as well while we build sustainably, look at our water. And if it's that close, then you can look at more walking and biking and other things like that, which is going to be more fun. You're going to see your neighbors. I've been biking a lot more places lately. It's been a lot of fun to see people while I'm out and about. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Silas. I'm all about fun, I want to talk about, because in 2 minutes I noticed that we really can only talk about one subject well. So I'm going to talk about the occupancy vote that we had. I voted against raising the occupancy, and I had very specific reasons why. I knew that we did not have the enforcement to enforce the 5. Like, we don't have the back end, as I would call it, or the infrastructure. We don't have enough police officers. We don't have enough code enforcement officers. So if you complain about noise, it's not going to be 5 minutes where the officer comes. So you have to listen to that driving bass, which is my least favorite thing, even though I do like good music. And so I didn't think the city could handle it. And well, we're going to see, because it did pass, as you know. We're going to see whether or not they can handle it. But if they can't, then we have to think about what we're going to do next. So I think for the smaller neighborhoods near the university, especially Table Mesa, where there are smaller houses, putting 5 people in a 2-bedroom house, they all have cars. It would be great if in the imaginary world they don't have cars, but in the real world, most of them do have cars. So what are they going to do with those cars is the question. So once we see how this occupancy change goes, we have to figure out what are the solutions to the unintended consequences from that particular vote. By the way, I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin. Who here went to school in Madison? Anybody? I will tell you our claim to fame of my class was that we built a papier-mâché replica of the Statue of Liberty on the frozen Lake Mendota. So that's real Madison. We like to have fun. I just want to end with, I actually didn't have an answer to this because I thought it was a different question. It's a long week for us. And I was going to talk about putting cameras on roads so that we could do something about all the people speeding, but that wasn't actually the question. But I do want to do that. We do have way too many people speeding, and we should do something about it. Very specific.
All right. I will say that on this question, I also believe in the blue line and the green belt and the height restriction. I do not support rezoning our current residential neighborhoods, and I did not support occupancy. I think in order to work within our existing infrastructure that we need a mix of adaptive reuse and long-term planning. From a long-term planning perspective, we talked a little bit about, Terry talked a little bit about Area 3, I agree with that. Although I do think that we need to consider the environment in every decision that council makes. Anything that comes up needs to have an environmental component attached to it. So there are some very intense studies that will need to be done in that area to be sure that we can maintain it from a infrastructure perspective. From adaptive reuse, that's using existing buildings. New developments are really carbon intensive, so if we can use existing buildings, existing warehouses, and create some affordable, unique housing opportunities, I think that would be one of our best options. Detroit has done this really well. Their economic downturn created the opportunity for them to use a lot of the vacant buildings and warehouses and industrial areas, and now they're creating walkable neighborhoods. innovation centers and really, really cool stuff in Detroit to bring people back. So using them a little bit as an example of as to how to do that adaptive reuse, I think would be from an environmental perspective very important. And also just from a development standpoint in an area where we have limited opportunity for true growth. Thank you.
All right, we're standing now. I'm glad that Silas and Tara are fun because everybody knows I'm very anti-fun. And Jenny, I'm really glad that we get to disagree on something. I feel like it's so rare that we have disagreement on the stage. And yeah, so I'm going to disagree with what Jenny just said. which is I did vote in favor of occupancy. I do think we need to figure out how to increase density effectively. And as somebody who often lives with community and as part of a age group that does that a lot, I think that this can be a good way to do it. I think there's obviously side effects that we especially see with college parties and everything, but I do think we need to figure out how to live in community more, because I think that's going to solve a lot of our problems of how we can add density effectively. So I'd like to see us, again, looking at how we can add density effectively. I think the blue line is great. I think the housing limit is great. I think they help keep Boulder beautiful. I'd like to see if there's areas where we can find a little wiggle room, if there's areas where we can add a little bit more height where it's not going to inhibit people's views. Like, I think from an equity perspective, we want to make sure that everybody has access to the same natural beauty in Boulder. So let's see if we can meet that while adding density and maybe adding some more height in some areas of Boulder. So that's what I have to say about that. I think Portland, Oregon has some really good ideas with their urban growth boundary that have really looked at how we can do infill and keep natural beauty while adding density. And I have a little bit more time, so I'm going to also disagree with Waylon, which is you said that we should really vote based on who has the right solutions. And I think that is somewhat true, but I think the truth of it is that we have an extremely capable staff. Like a lot of people talking about policing. We have an incredibly capable staff who has a lot of great solutions. So I think that we should really make sure that we are voting in people who are able to listen to make sure that we're really hearing where the community's at.
Thank you, Aaron, for being disagreeable. We need some of that. Okay, Waylon, you're up. The next topic might give some of you a chance to circle around and say something you hadn't said before. The next topic is preserving environmental quality and responding to climate change.
So I'll begin by disagreeing with Aaron. I'll just say you didn't listen, ironically. I said working towards solutions instead of being caught up in invective. And the way you work towards solutions, and he is right, so we're actually agreeing, is you listen to people who know more than you. And that is really important, because there's a fallacy in politics that we all think up here we're going to be the genius. That's not true. There's experts out there, there's stakeholders out there, so listening is vital. But nice try, Aaron. Now to focus on the subject. Years ago, and here's a little name dropping, I interviewed Deepak Chopra for the first time with my business Elephant Journal, which was voted #1 in green in media twice nationally. And I said, the environment. He said, don't say that. And I always hear the environment. So there's a little pro tip from Deepak Chopra, and I agree with him on this one. It's our environment. We're part of it. When you objectify it and put it out there, you're creating a separation, which is fundamentally the problem. So to get to the question, I haven't had a car for 15 years. Jacques and I were talking about gray watering. I gray water my washing machine. I'm zero waste. I never fill up my trash can. I'm on the board of Nude Foods. Anyone know Nude Foods? Largely woman-owned, locally owned. Please support it, not Amazon, Whole Foods. And the point of all that is we need to walk our talk. I'm vegan, that lowers the carbon footprint. I don't think I'm perfect or better than anyone, which lowers my vegan rating. But as a city, there's so much we can do, from white roofs to green roofs to solar. I, with Leslie, would have enjoyed punching, in a constructive, mindful way, Excel in the face forever. I wouldn't have given up that fight. It is urgent. Climate is the devastating issue of this campaign.
even if homelessness is getting a lot of understandable attention. Thank you. I am pro-environment. I'm going to come out for our environment.
Great. I'll just pick off where Waylon left off. So talking about Excel, it's like our Voldemort. We hate that. So if we're elected to council, any one of us will have the option to vote to remove our deal with Excel in, I believe 2025, and shop around for community choice energy. I think that is exactly what we should do. Excel for too long has been tiptoeing around the real issues, and the only thing they've done is increase the profits of their shareholders. They have done nothing for Boulder, and that is ridiculous. I remember being back in high school when I was talking to my professor if this was a good idea, and he said, well, in the long run, no, but short term, yes. Because Excel has the infrastructure. So he did not vote in favor of removing us from Excel because it was a short-term vision. I think that's what's clouded a lot of visions in politics. It's all short-term game. We have to really think long-term. Excel currently is looking to spend about $11 billion, including 2.5 redoing their natural gas and methane systems, and expects us to front that bill. That's ridiculous. We should stop paying them for natural gas. We should look like Fort Collins did, like Steamboat did, like a bunch of other cities in Colorado, and find our own community energy provider. Boulder has done a great job in providing solar gardens for low-income residents, and that's a start, and we can expand on that. We can have shared energy. There is a new co-op that's being started in Boulder County as well to share energy, and we're on the right foot. We just need to fully invest in that and remove Excel. We can still use their infrastructure, that's here, the infrastructure is here, but they're a company based in Minnesota. They're not local, they don't have our best intentions in mind. Currently about 20% of Boulder's, a little over 20% of Boulder's emissions come from natural gas, and that's just for like heating and building. So we really have to look at what buildings are using the most energy, how are we wasting energy, and we need to stop wasting energy, and that's looking at city buildings like the rec center that are a huge waste of energy and retrofitting them first. Thank you.
So I will definitely echo what Jacques is saying. One of our biggest levers for reducing carbon emissions is the Excel contract, and really getting them to move quicker on green energy is going to be critical. So we do have an opportunity coming up in 2025 to potentially get out of our contract, and whether we do it or not, we need to use that as a big leverage point to demand that they move quicker. There's still a lot of questions, I think, on how the community choice energy will work out, but it certainly on the surface seems like a pretty compelling option. So I think that, as city council members, it's something that warrants a lot of attention, but I'd love to keep the pressure on Excel. The other area, also Excel related, is wildfire resiliency and mitigation. So obviously top of mind for all of us with Marshall Fire, we got a really big wake-up call and an opportunity to respond and move forward. We just left a meeting right before this meeting with the Climate Initiatives team and the fire chief, talking to them about what they're focused on. And I'll tell you, we are in good hands. But we can't squander this opportunity. So, what we need to do, number one, with Excel is really get them moving on undergrounding our power lines. They have a commitment to do it. We need to make them move faster, and that goes back to our off-ramp on the contract. Using that as a lever to make them move will be certainly one way to approach it. Then when it comes to closer to home, our fire chief was telling us big focus on hardening our residences, so building materials that are resilient. And the fire department is actually doing assessments for our community members and looking at your house to figure out if you've got the right resilient materials. The city's got a grant program, it's small right now, but to allow people to retrofit their homes with this hardened material. So I think we have opportunities, and a lot of it is just having the political will, and as Waylon says, walking the walk.
So this will definitely be a question that I don't think there'll be much disagreement, because I think the climate was top of mind for pretty much all of us. And so Terry's right, the things that she just said with Excel and with our fire hardening, that meeting was so informative. It was great to be there. We have some fantastic city staff, I gotta say that. I just am so impressed by the solutions that they've come up with, the best practices that they have. So we gotta double down on that. Terry and Tina mentioned the water factor. We have a mobile home residents who don't have clean water going to them that are just outside the city limits. and it requires annexation. So we've got to move ahead on some things like that, including our water infrastructure, as Terry mentioned earlier, and getting the E. coli out of the creek. We have delayed maintenance on a lot of things. I have a neighbor who works in the utilities department who was talking about, we have a system from the 1950s to control some of our water infrastructure. And so when things go down, they're down. We have problems. And so they're working right now on a very expensive project because we waited so long to make sure that we have what we need with that. And so we've got to invest in those things. I was saying that earlier. It's really important to invest in that. We're seeing that as well in the age of our buildings, like our rec centers, right? We're doing a whole bunch of work in a building that's getting close to the end of life, which may not all be all that sustainable when it comes to building, and won't get us our long-term goals. And so focusing in the future is very important, as multiple people said. We've got to look at the big picture. It's important that we think for several decades down the road to make sure that we have what we need now and that future generations have what they need as well. Thank you.
You know, I was going to talk about Excel, but frankly, there's no world where I can speak as well as Jacques on that subject, so I'm not even going to try. So I'm switching to a new subject, and I want to talk about my favorite thing. I know a lot of you think I'm going to say e-bikes, but I'm not. My second favorite thing is trees. I love trees, and that is a great way to absorb carbon. So I'll tell you that we have this thing called TVAP. Who knows what it is, TVAP? Nikhil does, of course. TVAP is the building, the area that everybody loves to hate. It's right by Pearl and 30th Street. You know that whole section of new building? And you know when you see the Hyatt, and right in front of the Hyatt, there's all this concrete, who knows what? You know that area? Right in front of the, okay. Whoever thought of that is the worst idea I've ever seen. It's just a bunch of concrete in a little circle in the imaginary transportation area, because we don't have the transportation, you know, we don't have a train, right? So what I would like to do is in TVAP 2, which is coming up, we need to insist that we put in not only trees, but you know how we have the trees in those little grates? Did you ever see those? A lot of them can't live like that. So we need to pay way more attention to our trees. I had this crazy idea, which some people laughed at, I'm gonna be honest. Do you know that new Macy's? Remember the parking lot on 29th Street, and it's like a big like parking garage, and at the top of it, somebody said, what do you want to do? And I said, plant trees, honestly. Ah ha ha, that's so funny. But then I read somewhere that you can actually do that. And so I thought I'd think of some sort of wild idea today, and I don't know how possible it is, but I'm going to look into it. Tech Jenny, what do you think of that?
Yeah. Ask Girl Scouts. Yeah, ask Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts. I'm a Girl Scout, so I've got a lot of 28 Girl Scouts. They all know how to plant trees. We do a lot of environmental projects. Okay, so to reach our goal of net zero emissions, I think there's a couple of things that Boulder can focus on doing. We need to look at using more renewable energies, electric and solar. We have to look at providing incentives for people to electrify their personal vehicles and push on RTD to electrify their fleet as well. We have had some conversations with them. We realize that that's very important, but the city buses, I think, would be a huge win for our zero net emissions if we can get RTD to electrify those buses. We need to encourage people to walk and use public transportation and bike as much as possible. We need to maintain our open space and our wildlife corridors. Commercially, we can look at doing white roofs and green roofs and rooftop gardens and rooftop parks. I'm interested in exploring the options for CCE. I think that community choice electric is an interesting concept and something that we could definitely potentially do here in the city. But we do need to look at Excel and what our options would be to off-ramp out of that existing contract in 2025. And lastly, or maybe second to lastly, I think that we need to look at some natural climate solutions, like increasing our tree canopy, sourcing from local growers for our agriculture, vertical gardens in the city. And there's a lot of ways in a lot of cities that are doing things really amazing to combat climate change. For example, Barcelona, they're building what they're calling super blocks, and they're in the cities, they're all pedestrian walkways that are really pretty great. and Milan is doing urban forests, and Phoenix also is building rooftop parks. Lastly, I'll say that I learned the other day also that our utilities department is using so when the water goes through our treatment plants, the human waste, this is gross, the human waste goes into our treatment plants and then gets created methane comes out of that, and they're actually capturing that methane and using it to power our waste management trucks, which is something that I didn't know the Boulder was doing, but I think is kind of an amazing thing to look further into. So there's just an option, or something that Boulder's doing now.
Okay, I think I hit my disagreement quota for a while. So now I'm back in agreement mode, and I think I'm gonna, first off, I also love trees, and I think we should plant a lot more trees everywhere. And so what I want to speak to actually is what the city is already doing, because we have such, like Terry said, a few of us were just at a meeting with some like the climate initiatives team and other people working in climate in our city, and we have some really talented people who are doing really amazing stuff from a really holistic perspective. So, did I say really enough? So I would say one of the things that our city is doing that's really cool is kickstarted the Cool Boulder Initiative, which got a lot of community engagement, brought a lot of local organizations together around how do we create more pollinator pathways? How do we train pollinator advocates to plant pollinator gardens in their own yards and in their neighbors? How do we get more connected canopies by planting more trees so that we have tree coverage, which is going to be great for cooling our city down? How do we create more absorbent landscapes, which is great for flood mitigation, wildfire mitigation? So there's so many things that we can lean on. I think what we need to do right now is continue supporting that, continue supporting this community engagement, especially through Cool Boulder. A lot of what needs to happen is honestly in the community. There needs to be a lot more in the community. If we have more people who participate in those programs, then we can do a lot more. Beyond that, let's see. Obviously, we need to shift away from Excel. Obviously, we need to shift to more local energy solutions. We really need to work on how we're doing our food systems. One of the biggest contributors to climate crisis is that we're shipping food all across the country. So we really need to work, again, with community programs and with how we're doing policy. How do we get more of our food to be sourced locally so there's a lot less greenhouse emissions? And it's just, I think our food is healthier if we're eating it locally. That's just a belief I hold, but I really think that if we're eating locally, it's healthier for all of us. So let's work to really localize a lot of solutions, eliminate a lot of the Jeff Bezos BS that's like shipping stuff all over, and support things like new foods. Thanks.
So there are so many ideas that I agree with here. I think there's a lot of consensus around the importance of the environment. Just and at a high level, I just support a lot of legislative advocacy coming out of Boulder and then Boulder County, both to the federal government to continue to provide funds so that we can implement a lot of these ideas, and then at the state level to make sure that they also support these different initiatives, including electrification and clean energy. I live in an electric home. I pay Excel $10 a month. I have electric heat pumps. I have my own solar farm. It's awesome. I have an induction stove, and I think one of the important things is just to communicate to the community how awesome it is to not be dependent on the fluctuation of energy prices. So for the last 18 months, the natural gas variation didn't affect my cost to live, and that's pretty amazing. Now, with that, it was really expensive to become electric, so we need as a community to understand how we can help people get there, and those first initial sunk costs are very prohibitive. So we need to get in there and keep getting the incentives, and that's where that state and federal advocacy is really important. We're going to need help. And the other piece is Austin, Texas has a pretty cool thing. They did a green infrastructure map, and it shows all the different initiatives that we've all talked about that are being done by our climate initiatives team as well as more. It shows in a map where those initiatives are taking place. It describes what the initiatives are. Then it gives you the data about what are the results and outcomes. And finally, it shows you how you can get engaged in one place. And I think we're the kind of community that would love to be able to say on an app, oh, I just did a pollinator pathway, and I used an EV today, and then I did this. I think we're the kind of community that could get into this. I'd even game it. I think it could work. I'm not sure, that's getting a little specific, but it might be worth a try. So awareness, engagement, and advocacy are what I'm looking to do on City Council.
Okay, Jacques, you get the first crack at addressing traffic and transportation needs.
I grew up taking the bus, riding my bike around, never really needed a car in Boulder until I had to go start working in Aurora, so then I got a car. But you don't really need one in Boulder unless you have a place to be, you want to be on time. We have an incredible bike infrastructure that does need a lot of improvement. We have incredible buses that do need a lot of improvement. One of my ideas is to expand on the HOP program. So the HOP is a city-run program. A lot of the HOP buses are electric, and we need to look at, can we expand this program to give access to neighborhoods that don't have access to downtown transportation? I believe the HOP costs the city about $1 million a year. Expanding that would, depend on how many routes we want, the size of the buses, and actually doing statistically valid neighborhood surveys to ensure that each neighborhood is getting the proper representation of public transportation that they need. Next is, I would love Boulder to be a walkable city like Europe. It was being said earlier that there's transitions all across Europe to make them more walkable, to make them more pedestrian friendly, and I think that's something that Boulder needs to do. But while doing this, we need to make sure that it's accessible. My father is in a wheelchair, so there is times where it's hard to push him around from one side of Boulder to the other, and it's easier to park at a handicapped spot. So if we decide to make Boulder more walkable, we decide to close down sections of Pearl Street, West Pearl, East Pearl, we need to make sure that we're including it to be accessible for everyone and not discriminative. Boulder does have limits with our grid, and so we have to be able to work within those limits and possibly reimagine our transportation grid. One idea would be looking at the side streets and making them more biker friendly, possibly looking at increasing one-way streets so that there's wider areas for bikers to get around on. It's a big thing to tackle, but there's a lot of examples from other cities across the world that we can take into account and learn and make Boulder more sustainable. Thank you.
So earlier in the conversation, we talked about the need for an in-commuter survey. So I think there's two benefits to this survey. One is it tells us what kind of housing we need to build here, but it also tells us where people are coming from. And with that information, we could build or work on our regional transportation system to make sure that it's matched up with the footprint of our in-commuting workforce in order to really cut down on car travel into the city. I think along with that is really working with our businesses to incentivize participation in the Business EcoPass program and maybe even consider low or no fares for low-income commuters so that we can incentivize bus transit in a more equitable way. I think the other big opportunity here is around bikes. So e-bikes in particular really offer an opportunity for us to get a medium range here in a very efficient manner. I personally am a very poor bike rider. My husband laughs at me all the time. So an e-bike kind of solves my problems with that. So I think we really need to double down on our infrastructure there, make sure we've got bike lanes that can accommodate e-bike travel, and also really reimagine the rules around that, because I think we've got right now pedestrians, traditional bikes, and e-bikes all commuting on the same pathways. We probably need to formalize our policies a little bit more and rules around that, make sure we're enforcing speed limits so we don't run into problems there. And as Tina alluded to earlier, we absolutely need to create some rules, particularly for our younger Boulder residents, to make sure that they're not wreaking havoc on our community. I love the voice and sight approach. The other area around bikes too is just bike security. So encouraging people to use their bikes, you have to make sure that they feel like their bike's not going to get stolen when they use it. So, bike cages are a pretty expensive solution, but we could potentially use that in some of the higher commute areas. But also using bike valets in the Pearl Street corridor would be a great way to do that. And the added bonus there is we could actually use those as opportunity to educate folks on how to register their bike and really prevent bike theft. Thanks.
Right, transportation. This is a good one. I'm going to go back to helping Aaron out with some disagreement there. I'm going to say that rather than rules for things, because they can be ignored, we need the infrastructure. So what we can do is set up better methods to get around with protected bike lanes, but also As was mentioned, we need to make sure that we have a space for each mode of travel to happen, because everybody's going different speeds, and so it's best to have all those separated out. There's been great success of this all over the country. Protected bike lanes, elevated bike lanes. We're doing this on 30th in Colorado. There's already a protected intersection there that was just recently opened. Ribbon cutting was last week. That's a good step. It could use a few improvements according to a few people that I've talked to. But it also is in the process of getting additional elevated bike lanes, so there's further separation between bikes and the cars that are there. In addition, we do look at road diets, which is reducing the number of lanes. Ultimately what that does is it reduces car-to-car crashes, as well as ensures that 500 crashes that was mentioned earlier, and 10% being bikes and pedestrians, that's not happening as well. So digging into Vision Zero, our core arterial network program that the TAB board came up with is fantastic. We need to do things like eliminate slip lanes, which are those dedicated right turn lanes at many intersections. That creates more crash potential for pedestrians and bikes, and it's a hot spot. And also by reducing our lanes, we can make it so it's a shorter time to cross for pedestrians, to make sure they have enough time to get across, which also gets into what Jacques said about accessibility. And so we've got to make sure that we're providing all the pieces that we need for that, and when we change that infrastructure to make it so it guides us in our use of the roads and pathways and everything else, that's the best way to also stay safe. So it comes back to that as well. Thank you.
Well, I have some good news. After 2 years since 2021 I've been on council, I finally got my first priority approved for budgeting. That's pretty exciting. I got $30,000, which is not a lot, for our bike underpasses to be lit 24/7. I know, 2 years, so FYI, all your good ideas will take a long time. No, just kidding. The other thing that I just got approved was $500,000 extra dollars to fix our roads. And by roads, I mean not just potholes, because on some of our roads, they're completely, 6th Street is a complete disaster. If you try to bike on 6th Street, it's like the whole way. So it's not just the potholes, but it's the entire road. So, yay. You can look forward to some better roads okay, maybe not this year, but soon. And that took 2 years. But anyway, moving on to that, Terry stole my thunder about safe biking, but I will add a few things to what she said. And that is, for me, my goal has always been, if you know me, to get us senior. Who's a senior here? 65 plus. All right, a lot of us. Get us on bikes, e-bikes, because if you have arthritis, this is a great way to exercise. But besides that, I think that I go to next door to see what's stopping people from getting on their bikes, and it's usually crime and underpasses, etc. So for me, getting those bike underpasses safer and free from debris and tents is probably one of my #1 thing, because if we want to get people on bikes, they have to, women especially, they just have to feel safe going under those underpasses. And so that is my goal for the next 3 years, should I be reelected. By the way, I run around all the time making sure our bike underpasses are safe. Not run, I literally bike. So you're welcome.
Okay, so for transportation, I'll focus mostly on RTD. So in my opinion, RTD needs to be more reliable and user-friendly. We have, I'm originally from Chicago, and I grew up taking public transportation, and making it normal from a youth perspective is really important to keep kids using public transportation as they grow up and get into adulthood. And I mean, my kids right now, I live up in Gunbarrel, they take the 205 downtown to 29th Street Mall all the time. They have a mile to walk these days though to get to the bus, because we lost our local route during COVID. So right now RTD is, first of all, they've piloted a youth ride free program, so 19 and under youth ride at no cost. So that'll be for a year. Hopefully it just sticks, because right now I know that there is a lot more youth that are using our public transportation system. And what they're creating up in Gundurl is an on-call service, so you can call, and they haven't launched it yet, but it will be coming relatively soon, and I think that we'll be able to use this in other parts of the city where people have lost their route. And so it'll be a bus that's an RTD bus. It won't be a regular big bus, but some sort of, something probably similar to the VIA is what they will send out and have people be able to go to and from downtown and from south and from north more conveniently, and I think that's really important to focus on as well. We need to make sure that RTD is safer if we want people to use it as well, so I know that's something that they've been focusing on as well. And then from a who's done it well perspective, I will say I was in Amsterdam last year and I did not get on a bike there. That was one of the scariest things. I mean, the people who bike there are, I mean, they're on their phone while eating a muffin and texting and riding their bikes at like 30 miles an hour through Amsterdam. So their infrastructure is amazing. I did not get on a bike. But I did use their trams, their boats, and their trains, and it is amazing how easy it was just to hop on and off and go to different parts of the city. So, you know, I know that trams isn't something that we could use here, but I think we could use them as an example of ways that people do it well. Thanks.
Let's move to Amsterdam. Let's travel over there and learn. Yeah, I mean, I think Europe has a lot of really good solutions on how to do things a lot better than we're doing here. So let's, first off, learn from what they're doing and how we can create sustainable cities that are safe for biking. I just had a really good meeting earlier today with Chris Hagan, who serves as Senior Transportation Planner here in Boulder. Really good. I highly recommend y'all get to know him. A bunch of amazing ideas. And so I learned a lot about what's happening in transportation and where we're moving and what the roadblocks are. And yeah, I mean, I think obviously one of the biggest things we have to do is focus on safety for non-car. Like, I think most people would agree, we'll agree on the exact way to go about it, but I think most of us would agree we'd like to have a city where people don't need to have a car. We want to incentivize car light or car free. We might disagree about how much to push people or push people away from using a car, but I think in general we want a city where people cannot have a car. To do that, we need to prioritize safety. We need to have protected bike lanes. Also safety, in terms of not having the bike stolen. We need better bike parking. If we have infrastructure like that, it makes it a lot better to ride a bike in Boulder. So let's prioritize that. Also, transit is not working really well. Right now, especially in terms of buses, there's not enough buses, they're not going the right routes. This got affected big time by COVID. There was a lot of businesses opted out of the EcoPass because their employees didn't need anymore. But what that meant is that now RTD didn't have enough money, which now RTD doesn't have enough buses, which means the employers don't want to get back into it. And so there's a lot of issues, a lot of ways that city council should be pushing RTD to do it right. I really think we need to be looking, and the county is already kind of looking at this. Do we want to continue putting those tax dollars towards RTD? Or if they're not going to fix it up, should we consider creating our own transportation solution with more micro-transit?
All right, so there's so many good transportation ideas here. So I'll talk a little bit about Jock's thought that you don't really need a car in Boulder until you make the carbon-crushing decision to have children. And unfortunately, so we were a one-car couple who would use a car to go access hiking trails, sometimes drive a mountain bike or go skiing. And then we had kids, and then another terrible thing happened. One liked to dance despite all of our efforts, the other one liked volleyball. And it turns out we don't have a volleyball club program in Boulder, and the dancing studio had been priced out of Central Boulder and was out on 60th and Arapahoe. So we did a lot more driving than we ever intended that we would do. So my hope on City Council is that when we think about what we're moving, when we think about where are the tennis courts, where are the pools, where are the different facilities that people have expressed a lot of interest in, we need to be really careful about how we repurpose space and where we place it so that we can maintain this idea of a walkable neighborhood. And I'll just touch on the walkable neighborhood. I moved here 21 years ago, and we've talked about the walkable neighborhood, and we kind of started flirting with it out on 30th and Pearl, where there's a lot of units, and there's a supermarket, there are restaurants at the 29th Street Mall. But what we're lacking is that vibrant movement of people. And I think we need to think about how we can do it better. I was encouraged in the recent City Council meeting that Tara was alluding to by the Junction, that they're creating a new designation called functional to try and be funky like Boulder. And I think they're kind of hitting at that idea of this idea of the walkable European city we were dreaming of didn't happen at our first foray of this walkable neighborhood out east. So I know we can do better, we're going to do better, and it's gonna be awesome.
The question was asked like 30 minutes ago, I believe, but I think I remembered it was something to do with Boulder. I live on a bike. The whole endless war between bikes and car drivers that you can read on Nextdoor is silly. Again, we can work towards solutions by listening to people smarter than us, because every single bike, right, is someone getting out of a car and reducing traffic, making all of us happier. The road wear isn't happening. Roads are super expensive. We don't have the tax base we used to have, which is really important for everyone to realize who's lived in Boulder for a long time. We're used to having nice things and doing fun, funky things. Functional is the least funky name I've ever heard, by the way. And so, I always think of my next door neighbors. They have a huge SUV, they have a huge truck, they have like 8 bikes, they have 3 children. They prefer to bike. They almost never bike because their 3 cute little kids, and they're the most darling kids, are not safe, right? And then when they get to the end of that bike ride that they rarely do, they're nervous their bikes are going to be stolen. So we didn't need bike valets, we need bike cages, at least in central areas. Data can guide us downtown. And they've said that to me. That's solutions they actually know they want. Biking is super happy and healthy. It's, again, blue zone territory. Another key for our tax base and our restaurant owners, our employers, is to get this bus system working. RTD is less than an A+ partner. So anywhere where we can partner with the L-Towns, etc., Golden, to get more buses coming in more frequently. Again, I think smaller vans, EVs are fantastic. That will actually help our tax base. People will spend money here. I heard, Deion Sanders were making $17 million every game. We only get a third of that because so many people are staying out in Broomfield, etc. Thank you.
Okay, here's the situation. We are at 2 hours, but the organizers have told me, at the risk of being evicted by the landlords here, that they would love to hear your answers to the following question. So we have one more question, and this is going to be 1 minute. It's going to take me 1 minute to read the question. The city intends to raise between $64 and $100 million by increasing the utility bills of all Boulder residents. These funds are for building a mile-long flood control dam along Highway 36, which the city says will reduce flooding, but only for South Boulder. Do you support spending so much money to address flooding just in South Boulder? Do you support any alternatives to construction of this high-hazard dam for South Boulder? If so, what would those alternatives be? Terry, I'm sorry to do this to you. You're first up.
Okay, so I know this is a very contentious issue, and I will start by saying that it's been through 2 rounds, obviously, on the ballot. As I understand the situation currently, we are in a bit of an impasse because we've got some plans for a dam structure that are not really even tested. There are no working models for it. And we have some boards that are not even convinced that it will work. So to me, it seems like, without knowing all of the details here, that we owe it to ourselves to get a lot more data-driven about what would actually work in that location. I'm not sure it's possible that we're going to relitigate the location itself at this point. My understanding was that was pretty much a decided deal. It's more about what is actually going to go in there. So I would be much in favor of getting a lot more expertise and subject matter expertise on the ground there to evaluate and weigh in on the design that's been proposed, because it sounds like it's pretty questionable from a cost benefit perspective. Thanks.
So I do support that we spend some money on this on this area, and in addition, I mentioned earlier that the city has plans for flood protection across the entire city. They're just sitting there waiting to be implemented because we don't have enough money. So we've got to find that money somewhere. We're gonna have to look at some state partnerships, some federal partnerships. We've got to invest in our community. That's what it boils down to. We're talking about flood protection for a long time here. Talking about having just one area not flood is not enough. We need to have the entire city protected as much as possible. Even with all that protection as possible, that there's still going to be situations where we have something that overwhelms that with our environment the way it is. So continuing those environmental and sustainable initiatives is going to be part of the situation as well. The city's ready to go. Let's make sure we get that funded and get everyone protected. Thank you.
You know, it was my happiest moment about running in 2021 that I wasn't involved in the whole CU flood protection fiasco, so nobody could blame me. I'm like, oh, shoot. But so now you're asking this question again, and I really like what Terry said. So I'm wondering, do I have to give my own answer? Because I don't have one. I'm a super realist, which also means you're sometimes on the negative side. So on the negative side, twice already the voters voted for it, so it's probably going to happen unless, I don't know, you guys have an idea. And then you have to convince the voters to agree with you. And like in 2021, I absolutely went door to door in South Boulder and said, because there was a lot of anger there, and said, do your thing, because this is where I really like ballot measures. This is the opportunity for when people do not like what the city does, which is a lot, believe me, I get a lot of emails like so many. This is your opportunity to do something about it, and so do your thing once again and get people to support it.
Okay, I think flood protection is very important. With that in mind, $63 million to $100 million is too much money for that. We have spent a lot of time on design and planning and from the people that I've spoken to about this project, similar to what Terry said, the experts don't even agree on the plan that we currently have. So it's going through, the water department, the open space board of trustees. We have to give away open space in order to do it. None of this is perfect. But at the end of the day, we've got to figure out how to protect people, with flood mitigation. And that's part of where we live and what happens here and what we're dealing with climate change. So I hope that we can get something planned and put together sooner so we can stop spending this incredible amount of money over and over again on design plans that nobody's agreeing on. So flood protection is important. Thanks.
Yeah. So yes, we need to protect people, and sometimes that means spending money. It means directing money where it needs to go to ensure that people are protected. So I'm completely with Silas on that. In terms of this, I have heard a lot of people who have pretty solid criticisms of what's happening here, and a lot of people who suggested to me that it was not well thought out, that the plans are not well done. So my honest answer is I don't know. I would definitely talk to more people who know a lot more than me. I don't know enough in this moment to say whether or not that's a good idea, but I see issues with it, and yeah, we should bring more people into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Flood mitigation is incredibly important. I was here for the 2013 flood, and I was just starting on the school board, and we had to spend so much time working with FEMA to get compensated for damages done to our schools. The kids, I think, at Crestview lost about 30 days of school because of the impacts to the flood. And there, of course, was a famous helicopter rescue out of Kelwood. So flood protection is incredibly important. I'm not clear whether this question is coming to the council. My understanding is that we're moving forward with the flood protection initiative. And my hope is to understand it better and understand what the cost value is. I actually hadn't looked into the cost of the project and whether that's the right value. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the money is a bit of a red herring. Money matters, and we need to make sure we have a good plan. The experts support it. The experts need to get in a room and not be let out of the room until they can come up with a plan they think will work. But as Tina referenced, so many of us here were involved in that flood. It being hit after the fact, whether it's a fire flood, is far more devastating financially, emotionally, trauma to students, than being prepared. So we need to spend the money. We need to be safe. We can't let this go on forever, and we need to look to nature, as they're doing in New York, around Manhattan. They're looking to how nature can absorb floodwaters and how that's been reduced over the years. We can put up a man-made barrier and be arrogant and incompetent, or we can actually try to work with nature, listen to experts, and get this to happen and stop arguing about it. Thank you.
This is a really tough one. Climate change has shown with more water vapor in the atmosphere, we're more likely to have flooding. It's a constant thing that's been shown across the globe. I do believe we need proper flood mitigation. I wish this wasn't attached to housing and CU, and I wish there weren't so many strings attached to this. I think that's where the real issue lies here is we weren't able to do this in a way that we could have modeled nature because CU had so many requirements and there was just too much attached essentially. So the issue is we have this structure of a dam that's never been tested. It's never been replicated across the globe essentially. We've spent close to $30 million building this, getting this example brought forward, and we're still not sure is it going to work. Is someone going to be able to access the dam to operate this switch when we're already, 4 hours into the flood? Is someone going to be able to get there? Is the water going to go in the proper direction that doesn't affect the endangered species in this area? So I'm very hesitant to say that I support this that's being presented to us, but I do believe that we need flood mitigation now, and that's what I support.
We are out of time. Let us thank the candidates and wish them the best of luck in the campaign and next election.